Sound test. Microphone's working. Hi everyone, my name is Mason and I work for Comet Backup here in New Zealand. Welcome along to the Carme release webinar. So I'm here to talk for about half an hour about our latest software release, what we've been working on, and all of the new and exciting changes from the last quarter. So I have been regularly running this webinar series that showcases the latest and greatest new features Comet has to offer. Last year, back in 2021, we ran these webinars every month, but at the start of this year, 2022, we switched to publishing a monthly blog post about what's new, and this info webinar series now runs once a quarter related to the major quarterly software releases that we do. So if you count the whole webinar series, then this is episode 22. But regardless of what our schedule is, it's all on the webinar platform. You can subscribe to notifications about when we go live. My talk today will probably be about 30 minutes, and that's including some time for questions at the end. So if you're watching this live on our webinar platform, I'm coming to you live. It's 9 a.m. here in New Zealand, and there is a chat widget, so you click the button at the bottom of your screen to pop it open. Feel free to, if you have any questions as we go, just write them in, and I'll do my best to answer them at the end. So about 30 minutes, maybe a bit less if I talk quickly. Everyone's busy, so I'll keep it short. Otherwise, hope you've got a coffee, get settled in, and I'll just press on with things. So as you've seen from the title, today I'm going to talk about Comet 22.8 Carme, our latest and greatest software release version. So the 22.8 version number, it's the year and the month. We release new Comet versions roughly every week under the Voyager release track. And then every quarter, 4 times a year, we take all of our regular Voyager development and roll it up into these quarterly milestone releases. And that's your new fixed point to build on, offer to your customers. We'll support it with patches and in the tickets. And another quarter's just flown by. And so today I'm going to recap all the new things you can expect when upgrading to Carme. So what you're seeing here in this picture, this is Carme. It's another moon of Jupiter. We've named all of the quarterly releases after moons of Jupiter recently. So our Voyager releases started with Mercury in the inner solar system a few years ago now, and we've been slowly moving outward to the outer planets and moons. All of Jupiter's moons are named after women who were close to Zeus in Greek mythology. And Jupiter's got 80 moons discovered so far, and so that tells you something about Zeus. And new moons are continuing to be discovered as recently as 2018. So in terms of software code names, we're not going to run out of code names anytime soon. This picture was taken by the Observatory OHB in France, and as we get further down the list of moons, we've already gone past the the big and easy ones that had good photos taken as far back as Galileo in the 1600s, and most of the 80 moons of Jupiter are further and further away. They do get harder to take good images of. But enough about the name. What about the features? So we've counted 7 features and 14 enhancements this quarter for Carme, and the full changelogs are available on our website in the release notes section, and today I'll just walk you through some of the main ones. Starting with iDrive E2. So iDrive E2 are a new cloud storage provider hitting the market earlier in the year, and we're very pleased to announce that iDrive E2 are now available as a built-in option in the storage vault selection type. So they're S3 compatible, and so it's using that tried and true API integration with Comet that we know works very well, both in theory and in practice. So as soon as E2 was launched, you were able to use it with Comet via our custom S3 compatible option. But there's a few things we've done to make it easier and more seamless. First of all, there is a direct integration option at the storage vault. Now this uses the iDrive E2 API to automatically determine the target bucket hostname, and so this reduces the number of configuration steps compared to the S3 compatible option, so it's a little bit simpler. And as well as using iDrive E2 credentials directly, you can also add them as a storage template provider in the Comet server settings area. So as a quick aside, we have renamed requestable storage to storage templates. And this is the same feature of Comet server that can provision new per customer credentials for your storage platform. So overall, the new name should make the behavior a little bit clearer to new Comet partners. And so when you're using this storage templates feature, you enter your top level credentials in this field, and then Comet server will use them to provision private buckets with individual credentials for each separate user's storage vaults. And this allows seamless direct to cloud backup from the end user's PC without needing to traverse that data through the Comet server storage role. And one last thing to say about iDrive E2 is that there is a special promotional offer for Comet users. Mention Comet Backup when signing up to get 1 terabyte of free storage for 30 days. So that's one new thing that's new in 22.8 Carme. Moving along, another feature is there is a new branding option in the server settings. So until now, Comet Server has always generated a custom Comet Backup client installer on the fly, customized to embed your own branding and embed your own Comet Server login URL, and various other customizations of that sort. But this makes all of our MSP, IT companies, partners into distributors of custom software. And there's a few interesting trends that you sort of become subject to when you're distributing custom software, and things like experiencing issues with Smart Screen, Gatekeeper, antivirus products with your custom generated client installer. It's often to do with EXE reputation. And even if you have hundreds of customers, it's likely that Bitdefender will see your custom EXE for the first time and be quite defensive about it. It's unfortunate, but that's the world we live in. And there are solutions. You want to look into code signing, and that generally resolves the issue. Code signing is a bit of effort to set up. So if you are in a position to allow the default Comet branding, then using a pre-built code-signed client installer may make things easier for you, because then we don't need to customize the EXE. We can code sign it as Comet before release. A single EXE will be seen by more users. Bitdefender will have seen it before. And so things will just go a bit more smoothly to avoid those signing and reputation issues, and makes things a bit smoother, as long as you can accept some limitations. Because when you're using a pre-built client installer, Comet Server no longer has an opportunity to embed your branding, for one, and also it no longer has an opportunity to embed your Comet Server URL into the application. So normally your Comet Server URL gets baked into the EXE as part of the build step, but with a pre-built client, there's no opportunity for us to get that in. So to compensate for this, we've made 3 additional changes. Firstly, for the silent install process, this is a picture of the documentation for our silent install system. There's a lot of custom parameters you can pass for the silent install. Now there's a new server parameter to override the default login URL. So if your silent install runs under cmd.exe, there's you need to be careful with the double quotes. But that's how you can get around the problem for silent installers. And most installs are actually done by double-clicking on the exe, however. So the way we've approached that is by embedding the URL into the file name. So if you're using the pre-built client option, then there's no embedded default URL. And if there's no embedded URL, the installer will now try and read out the default URL from the installer's file name. So this only happens on Windows, only if the info is present in the name, and only if there is no URL already baked into the installer. So if you have an existing branding settings that work, then don't worry about this, it doesn't affect you. And thirdly and finally, if none of the above situations work for you and the default server login URL could not be determined, then of course the user is required to enter it in the login dialog of the software on the third field. And generally this third field is hidden behind the advanced options checkbox. And now what we've done is we've opened this up automatically in more cases where there was definitely no URL. So something that's new in 22.8 Carme is we show this field in more cases. If it's blank with an HTTP, blank with a port, localhost, and so on. And in particular, we've decided to also open it up if you've got a 192.168 LAN IP address for your Comet server. And maybe this is going on a bit of a tangent, but when you're first configuring Comet, you may be accessing the Comet server by its LAN or localhost IP address, and this address may get compiled into a custom client installer, and that's quite difficult to troubleshoot when you take that installer and put it on a different network. So Comet already showed the server URL field here by default if a localhost was used, but also showing it for LAN IP can really speed up how you troubleshoot this issue. So it's at pre-built clients in 22.8 Carme. It's just really an option to avoid signing and reputation issues if you can cope with using the default branding instead of custom branding. Random job delay. So if you have a large customer base on your Comet server, it's likely that across your users, there is a large number of jobs starting at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m., and in general, sort of a pattern where a lot of jobs just start at the top of the hour. And when many jobs all start simultaneously, in some cases, this can cause a performance issue with the Comet server to have to accept so many jobs at once. And so there is now a new feature in the backup job schedules to specify a random delay. And the random delay is calculated based on per user, per schedule, per invocation parameters. And if this is applied to many customers, it will stochastically have the effect of spreading out this peak load spike over a long time period. And even something just like a 5 or 10-minute delay, it's not going to be disruptive for the customer, and it can significantly improve how responsive your Comet server infrastructure is. Ultimately, the setting has to apply to individual schedules, so it's available at the individual schedule here, but generally you would enforce the setting at the policy level to affect entire batches of customers, or even at the whole server level where it will override any user or policy version of the setting. And so that's how you'd apply it in bulk, just to get that average smoothing effect and make sure you don't have hundreds and hundreds of backup jobs all trying to start at the exact same second and overloading your Comet server a little bit. Overwrite only if newer. So this is a really quick feature to explain. When you go to restore data in Comet Backup, you can choose whether or not you want to overwrite existing files. So being able to choose to overwrite existing files or not is a previous feature. When exactly would you decide if you want to overwrite files or not? Well, it depends if you're in a complete data loss event or a partial one. So if you've lost 1 or 2 files and they're 100 folders deep, then one quite easy thing to do is say, tell Comet, restore all files except the ones that are already there. Don't overwrite them. Simple. So that's a simple example of a partial data loss scenario. There are more complicated ones. We've experienced some restore situations where the customer has had a data loss event and they need to restore data, but some files they've picked up and carried on with and they're newer. At the same time, they've managed to recover some files from elsewhere and they're quite a bit older. In this situation, they've got a mix of files. They want to restore files from the backup job if they're better than the ones that they've got. And if there's 1 or 2 files in question and you know what files they are, then you could just restore those files individually. But in a large scale situation, it's much more difficult. You really want to restore everything from the previous backup job, except for the files that the customer has been carrying on with that have a newer timestamp on them. And so that's what this new option does. When restoring data, you choose only if the restored file is newer, and that's it. So when going to restore Comet, we'll check if the target file already exists. If it does exist, then what's its last modification timestamp, and then it can make the decision of whether to download that file from the storage vault or not. Easy, great, nice, simple feature. This used to be a checkbox for do you want to overwrite existing files or not, and of course that's still an option. It's just now there are 3 options, so it had to become a drop-down. And this is available both in the Comet Backup desktop app and also in the Comet Server web interface. Target device for test connection. In the Comet Server web interface, when looking at a user's protected item or storage vault, there is a test connection button at the bottom here that uses Comet's code to reach out to the target device and ensure that device is able to, connect to the thing successfully. So this is a remote control feature that gets the end user client to do the connection test in the background, which is great because it means it shows you the real network situation that customer is in. And it works for local path storage vaults as well. Overall, works great except for one little question: which connected device should do that connection test? So I said this test connection button appears on both protected items and storage vaults. The answer for protected items is quite easy because a protected item is a per device concept. It's they're private for each device in a user account. It's very clear that we should send this live connection signal to the correct device. But for a storage vault, any device in the account could potentially respond with this information for us. And up till now, Comet Server has just picked a random device in the account for the connection. But in the case of storage vaults, the situation can be quite different. If we're looking at a shared storage vault in the cloud, it's likely that any device can reach it. But there are various situations where only some devices in an account might be able to access a storage vault. For instance, a local path fault for an external hard drive. That external hard drive is only going to be plugged in on one device. Or troubleshooting if one specific device is unable to reach that target network. And so to help in these situations, the test connection button now shows a custom drop-down if multiple device connections could be used for that test. And this is all just about really giving you that better troubleshooting to help you resolve issues for your customers. Per-tenant SMTP settings. So another feature new in Comet 22.8 Carme. Starting off with explaining some background details, Comet Server can be configured for multi-tenancy to give each of your partners an isolated zone within your Comet Server for their own individual customers and end user accounts. And so we've seen this feature used for reseller support and branding imprints, because there's a separate branding for each tenant if you want, optional. It's also been used for hosted service offerings, just general customer grouping. So tenants have been a standard feature of Comet Server for a few years now. They used to be called organizations, and we're continuing to improve the support. It's a very flexible feature, but ultimately every tenant is under the jurisdiction of the top level Comet Server administrator, and there are some limitations on the allowable settings. So a tenant can have customized email settings so that the tenant's customers will receive their email reports from the tenant company's email address. However, in the last few years, email has become highly rigid and standardized. In order for your email to be properly delivered to the recipient's inbox folder and not end up in spam or bounced or anything else, there's a certain amount of administrative work required to authorize domain names, set up SPF and DKIM, and you can't really just put whatever you like in the from field. And in particular, if DKIM is involved, then it's likely that you have to send via an authorized SMTP server that will apply DKIM envelope signing. So in Comet 22.8 Carme, we've expanded this customization field here. It used to just let you configure the sender name and sender from address, and now it allows you to customize the SMTP server used on a per tenant basis. So straightforward, all tenants default this option here, deliver via the system top level configuration, but you can change it to deliver via custom SMTP server and customize each tenant to put in custom details. Now, this is something that must be done by the top level administrator only. The tenant cannot set this up themselves, and unfortunately, there's an important reason for that, which is the risk in allowing someone to control these fields arbitrarily. Email delivery is actually, I could talk all day about email delivery protocol from the 70s. It's actually really fragile, and there's a risk that a bad configuration can tarnish your IP address's email delivery reputation, which is one of the factors that go into deciding whether or not your email is spam or not. So on a multi-tenant shared server, there's a risk that a misconfiguration here will cause an impact on your IP reputation that will affect other tenants on the same Comet server. So as a result, we only allow the top level Comet server administrator to configure these email settings on behalf of your tenant. And our own Comet hosted service is based on the tenants feature, and so we expect to be able to offer custom SMTP support to Comet hosted users soon. Fallback LDAP domain controllers. Okay, real quick feature this time. So Comet server supports using external authentication sources for admin accounts. Watch the space, but right now the main option is LDAP, which you probably know because Active Directory in Windows Server is an LDAP server, amongst other things. It's also a Kerberos server and so on. And so to set this up for federated logins into your Comet server, first you go into the Comet server web interface, find the settings page, click this external authentication sources button, and then you can lodge an external additional source for your LDAP server, whether that's Active Directory or anything else. It's most likely Active Directory. So this feature has been here for a while. What's new is if you have a highly available LDAP server infrastructure using multiple servers, such as an Active Directory failover cluster, primary, fallback domain controllers, you're now able to configure multiple LDAP server addresses in Comet server. So when an admin user tries to authenticate at the Comet server login screen, Comet server will then forward those credentials to the LDAP server. And if the connection to this first server fails, Comet will try the remaining entries on the list in order before denying the authentication attempt. So enter your primary server first and your fallback server second. And you can set this up from the Comet server web interface. Or if you're a self-hosted user, then you can edit the cometd.config file, of course. And there's a third way, which is anything you can do in the Comet server web interface can be done via our API. So a very brief summary of the key points here. Comet server's web interface is an SPA, single page app. And that means when you open the Comet server web interface and it downloads and runs a web app in the browser, and that web app, it is really an application running inside the browser, and that application makes API calls out to the Comet server itself. And Comet server only ever speaks in terms of the API. And this has been a really excellent technical foundation for us as our development team reuses the official Comet Server API. And that means the API is stress tested, it has broad feature coverage, and it allows any external API developers to get the same great experience we do internally. And we do want that to be a great experience. So the API makes use of JSON over HTTP. It's simple to interact with. We have sample code and SDKs for several programming languages. So that's the background information, and I just want to quickly run through two main pieces of API and SDK news to share over the last quarter. The first is that our PHP and Ruby SDKs on GitHub have had a major version bump, and this is also known as a SEMVer major bump, which means that we have changed something in the SDK. That means you potentially need to change your own integration code as well. Now, the API itself is still fully backwards compatible. All of the JSON and HTTP that underlies it is completely unchanged, or if it is changed, it's changed in a fully compatible way, so old code will continue to work. But we've changed some things in the SDKs themselves to make them easier to use, make better use of modern PHP features such as scalar type hints in PHP 7. And if you're stuck using a 10-year-old version of PHP for your integration, then you have my condolences. Please stick with the previous SDK v3 and Ruby v1 SDKs, which you can find on Composer, RubyGems, or by git tag from our GitHub account. Another feature released in August is our latest SDK, which makes it easy to call the Comet Server API from the Go programming language. And this SDK is now available on GitHub under the MIT license. So don't get this confused with Comet Go. Comet Go was the old name for what is now the Comet hosted service. The Comet Go SDK is a Go language SDK for the Comet Server API, and it includes all the definitions for the whole API as per the Ruby and PHP SDKs. It comes with built-in examples. It's designed for use with Go mod. In our company, we use the Go programming language extensively. So it's perhaps a little unusual that we didn't have a public Go SDK up until this point, but that's largely because PHP and Ruby produce sort of the largest demand from external developers looking to integrate Comet with their websites and e-commerce platforms. And for our in-house Go development environment, we can use the type definitions directly without any SDK. But having this public Go SDK definitely makes it easier to write small additional tools. And we've seen some interest in this area already. You might not be aware, but the Go programming language has an official mascot, and it's this little blue-green gopher animal character. So the 22.8 Carme release is the culmination of everything up through the previous 22.6 Voyager release cycle. There's a lot that's gone into it. I've talked about a lot of things already. There's a few more things I haven't even covered, such as S3 compatible region selection. It's a new compatibility feature for some storage providers too. But having done this roll-up release to 22.8 Carme, from going forward, we're planning to make some bigger changes. And during the 22.9 timeframe upcoming, we expect to remove support for running the Comet Backup desktop application on Windows Vista and the original Windows Server 2008 RTM and macOS 10.10 Yosemite. So the new minimum operating system requirements for running the 22.9 Comet Backup desktop app will be Windows 7. Windows Server 2008 R2, which is it's actually quite newer and different from the original 2008. And the new minimum version for macOS will be OS X 10.11 El Capitan. So we've run the numbers and this shouldn't be a problem. We last talked about this publicly late last year when we talked about when we dropped support for running Comet Server on Windows Vista, and 9 or 10 months have flown by. And you know, it's really funny that we're even still talking about this. Windows Vista is not widely used or relevant. We expect minimal issues as a result of that deprecation. Regarding Windows Server 2008 RTM version, we do still see some usage, however declining, however small, it is still there. And that's why we do want to be clear that you have options available to you. If you still have end users running these operating systems, Vista, the original Server 2008, you can either stay with the 22.8 Carme release cycle. Of course, the 22.8 Carme series will be supported going forward for a time. Another thing you can do is install the 22.8 Carme Comet Backup desktop app and use it along with an upgraded version of Comet server. It's perfectly fine to run an older client with a newer server, or else, of course, the last thing to do is arrange for your end users to upgrade to Windows 7. Upgrade to Windows 7 seems pretty crazy to say, but yeah, upgrade to Windows 7 or Windows Server 2008 R2. There is an upgrade path from 2008 RTM to the 2008 R2. Mac OS 10.11 El Capitan or newer, and Linux is good too. It's really interesting to note that from the Microsoft point of view, both the original Vista-based Server 2008 RTM and also its successor, the Windows 7-based Server 2008 R2, have got the same extended support lifecycle. However, the underlying technology of the R2 update, the Windows 7 technology, is significantly more advanced than the Vista-based 2008 RTM edition. And so correspondingly, it's easier for us to develop for. So the difference is small in name, but very wide in terms of compatibility. And the Windows 7 and the Server 2008 R2 are much more popular. They're obviously old, but still widely used. They've got much stronger technical underpinnings. It's likely that we will be able to keep supporting Windows 7 and Server 2008 R2 for a much longer period of time. So what do you get for this? Why are we doing it? That technology underpinning really does matter, and it's something that was holding us back developing a certain specific new feature that you'll see later on in the 22.9 series. Now, this webinar is talking about 22.8 Carme, so I don't want to spoil the next quarterly webinar too much, but we have managed to ship our 22.9.0 release last week, and I'll cover this in more detail in 3 months' time, or go have a read of our latest blog post. But the Voyager Series 22.9 has reopened with some exciting new features, such as a brand new theme for the desktop app with these widgets. We've also brought in storage support, another great low-cost cloud provider, including secure storage template provisioning for that direct-to-cloud backup, and streaming restores into MySQL without spooling temporary files, and many more features besides. And Comet continues to add new features and enhance existing features on a near weekly basis. So you're welcome to check out our weekly Voyager releases if you want the very latest work that we've been doing. But if weekly upgrades aren't your thing, then we do recommend sitting on the quarterly releases just for predictability around your install cycle and what your customers experience. So that's all I have for today. Are there any questions? So you can use the questions and chat button at the bottom. I can see there's 1 or 2 questions in there already. So just to recap, I talked about our latest release, 22.8 Carme, and many of the new features in it, including iDrive E2 as a storage vault and also as a storage template. I talked about the pre-built client branding option to help provide improved reputation to resolve issues with antivirus and code signing. The follow-on features, the extra silent install parameters, URLs and file names, showing a URL field by default. What else did I talk about? I talked about the random job delay, how you can use it to spread out the peak load on your Comet server. I talked about Overwrite if newer, the latest option when restoring if you're in that partial data loss state. Test connection on target device for better troubleshooting connection problems. Per-tenant SMTP settings, so you're allowed to extend that control down to the tenant level. Fallback LDAP domain controllers, SDK updates, major releases for PHP Ruby, new SDK for Go. We expect 22.8 Carme to be the final release supporting Windows Vista and the corresponding original version of Server 2008, and a very brief look at some 22.9 things. So we have a question here. Will the tenants feature come to manage hosting as well, or always will be available in self-hosted only? So right now we're using the tenants feature to make Comet Hosted possible. And so when you sign up for Comet Hosted, you are a tenant within a much larger Comet server infrastructure, and tenants are currently not hierarchical, so we're not able to expose the tenants feature to Comet Hosted at the moment. We do have sort of a long-term plan to support sub-tenants, and once that feature becomes available, it is likely that you will be able to use tenants on the Comet Hosted service. Until then, an alternative is to create multiple Comet Hosted servers. Any more questions? No more questions. I'll just hang out for another 30 seconds. Just got a thank you from someone. Yeah, thanks for joining and thanks for listening along and staying awake for the presentation. I do appreciate it. Not sure what time it is and where you are, but I think that's all the questions we have time for today, but we do still want to hear from you. If you have any questions at all, we're always happy to help out. We're more than happy to hear your questions by ticket through the usual ticket system at account.cometbackup.com, or you can email us, hello@cometbackup.com. Or did you know that we do support phone calls? So our company is based in New Zealand. We do have international support teams for that round-the-clock level 1 technical support, but if you want a sales call or if you want any more advanced technical support or troubleshooting, we'll need to figure out a good time that suits us both in New Zealand, UTC plus 12, and in your country. So just makes scheduling a bit more complicated, but still all you have to do is go to the Comet website. At the bottom of the page, you click Contact Us, and there's an option to schedule a phone call with a time zone widget showing our available times, and it will just work everything out for you. We're more than happy to jump on a call, and often that's a very quick way of clearing the air and getting answers to any questions you might have. So that's all from me. Hopefully you've managed to take away some useful information. So please check out the latest version of Comet 22.8 Carme. All users of the previous quarterly series, 22.5 Lysithia and earlier, are encouraged to upgrade, but we're happy for you to keep using older quarterly versions if you feel like it. Hope you're all keeping well and safe, and you can expect another webinar for the next quarterly release in 3 months' time. Cheers.